Hello, thank you for watching this video. Welcome to Paws Movies. I am about to discuss an animated movie, from 1982, called The Secret of n.i.m.h. Based off the book, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of n.i.m.h, written by Robert O'Brien. Spoilers are imminent. Our story begins with a wise old rat, named Nicodemus, recording the history of the rats. Nicodemus writes how Jonathan Brisby was killed today, while helping with the plan. 4 years ago, the rats escaped the terrible cruelties of n.i.m.h. It was all thanks to Jonathan Brisby. Nicodemus is very sad his friend is dead. Nicodemus is unsure how to console Jonathan's widow, Mrs. Brisby. She knows nothing of the rats, she knows nothing of the plan. He signs the book using the magical glowing ink. The book contains other information, about other rats that escaped n.i.m.h. He clutches a glittering amulet, with a bright, and shining red stone. He calls out to the deceased, Jonathan Brisby, wherever he may be, to comfort his wife tonight. She will be waiting for him to come home. But he will not return. Nicodemus places the amulet in a gold box. The box has a circular insignia with the letter N, which most likely stands for Nicodemus. The old rat Nicodemus parts ways with his deceased friend Jonathan Brisby. Interestingly enough, in the book, Nicodemus was not a very old rat. And he wore an eye patch. Mrs. Brisby, a field mouse, ventures into a rusty old machine, calling out for Mr. Ages. Mr. Ages is a cantankerous old mouse. At first, he tells her to go away. Against his wishes, she continues down into the machine searching for him. Then, Mrs. Brisby begs him for help, claiming her son is very sick. He tries to shoo her away again, but she is persistent, and finally, he agrees to help her. Mr. Ages leads her to a chamber full of mystical contraptions and bubbling alchemical inventions. Mrs. Brisby describes the symptoms of her son's illness, and Dr. Ages. Mr. Ages diagnoses her son with pneumonia. He prepares a medicinal powder for Timmy and places the medicine in a white envelope. He informs Mrs. Brisby that Timmy must stay in bed to recover. He cannot go outside or be moved for at least 3 weeks. In the book, Mr. Ages emphasizes that even a couple breaths of the chilled air outside could be the end for poor Timothy. As Mrs. Brisby is leaving, Mr. Ages shuts the door in her face. Mrs. Brisby tries to hurry home, but is held up after spotting a clumsy crow, named Jeremy, who has tangled himself in red string. She scurries to assist him. He tells her that he is building a love nest with the string. He has not met the love of his life yet, but he still wants to build a love nest. Mrs. Brisby warns him of the cat, Dragon, and expresses that he needs to be careful. But it is too late. The whole time, the cat Dragon was stalking the two of them, and Dragon is already creeping up on them from under a log. Jeremy, who is allergic to cats, starts to sneeze, sneezing directly into Dragon's face. A beautiful animated action sequence commences, with Mrs. Brisby running for her life. After grabbing the medicine for her son, she books it. The cat chases her up a tree, to the top of a waterfall. The cat and mouse both fall into the water below. Mrs. Brisby uses the water wheel to pull herself to safety. Even though she is safe and alive, Mrs. Brisby cries. She thought she lost the medicine for her son, but Jeremy retrieved it for her. She must now hurry home. Jeremy offers to fly her home, but she rejects his offer, because she is afraid of heights. She hops across the lily pads in the pond, and Jeremy tries to copy her. He splashes around. Meanwhile, at the Brisby home, in the garden patch by the stone, Mrs. Brisby's kids are worried about their mom, asking each other if they should go out looking for her. Since they recently lost their father, it is no surprise the children are worried for their mother. Mrs. Brisby had 4 children with her late husband. There is Martin, a fearless and hot-headed young field mouse. Cynthia, the youngest, who is bubbly and curious. Teresa, the eldest, who is mature, and the most responsible of the children. And then of course there is Timothy, aka Timmy, who is currently sick in bed. He is resilient, but he is very ill. Their Auntie Shrew, a shrewd shrew, arrives at their house, yelling for Mrs. Brisby. The shrew came to warn Mrs. Brisby about the upcoming moving day. Auntie Shrew and Martin get into an argument where they start hurling insults at each other. Mrs. Brisby then arrives home. Still upset from her argument with Martin, Auntie Shrew informs Mrs. Brisby that the frost is off the ground. Moving day is at hand. Mrs. Brisby and her children must all prepare to move immediately. Auntie Shrew is a complex character. Even though she is crass, and somewhat annoying, she is a driving force of safety throughout the plot. Mrs. Brisby prepares the medicine for Timothy. Martin apologizes to his mom for upsetting the shrew. The other children watch as their kind mother takes care of their ill brother. Cynthia asks if Timothy is going to die. Her mother reassures her, no, while her sister, Teresa, looks uncomfortable. This scene is a great example of deep issues in a children's movie. Don Bluth often had issues with his stories containing themes that were apparently too complex for children to understand. In this scene, Cynthia's reaction is very realistic for a young child. The discomfort on her sister's face is just as realistic. Is this scene too much for a children's movie? What do you think? Meanwhile, at the farmhouse, a long extension cord pokes through an upper story window while voices inside discuss n.i.m.h, the National Institute of Mental Health. Beth, the farmer's wife, says a man called from n.i.m.h, asking if they noticed anything strange about the rats on the farm, but she claimed she saw nothing unusual. Her husband tells her he is going to sleep, but she is still concerned about the rats and about the strange phone call from the National Institute of Mental Health. The rats continue on with the extension cord, bringing the cord down into the rose bush. The next morning, Mrs. Brisby is awake, outside, at dawn, with Auntie Shrew following close behind. Auntie Shrew claims again it's time to move and she hopes Mrs. Brisby and her family are ready. Mrs. Brisby claims Timmy will die if he feels the chill in the air, but Auntie Shrew informs her that he will certainly die from the tractor coming. Auntie Shrew warns Mrs. Brisby, once again, to move her children before it's too late. But it is already too late, and the tractor turns on. Auntie Shrew sprints through the field, calling out to the other animals, to warn them it is moving day. As the shrew calls out, the rabbits, the moles, the rats, the birds, the beavers, even the frogs, all take action immediately. The animals scatter. You can see the terror in each individual animal's face. Mrs. Brisby finds Auntie Shrew. Mrs. Brisby has Teresa, Cynthia, and Martin with her. She begs the shrew to take her children. Mrs. Brisby then runs off to stop the tractor by herself. She runs after the giant machine, clutching onto a rattling chain and hoisting herself onto the tractor. Meanwhile, Timothy lay resting in bed, without awareness of the destruction occurring outside. Auntie Shrew appears behind Mrs. Brisby to help. She climbs inside the tractor, and pulls random wires. She even cuts the fuel line, rendering the machine worthless just before it reaches Mrs. Brisby's house, and the sleeping Timothy. Mrs. Brisby is beside herself, with no idea what to do, but Auntie Shrew reassures her the great owl will know, and that she must visit the great owl. But Mrs. Brisby is scared. Owls eat mice. Nicodemus, watching the scene through a magic glass, calls out to Jonathan, and through the glass, he calls out to Mrs. Brisby, telling her to visit the great owl. Next, we see Jeremy flying through a bright red sky, with Mrs. Brisby on his back. Jeremy assures her that the great owl can help, but Mrs. Brisby is scared, both of the heights, and at the fact that owls eat mice. Jeremy reassures her, owls only eat mice after dark. They fly into the woods together and Jeremy lets her off near an old tree. A deep and booming voice beckons Mrs. Brisby into the home of the great owl. Mrs. Brisby ventures cautiously after Jeremy pushes her to the entrance. The voice tells her to come inside or go away. Thoughts of Timothy give her strength as she makes her way through the owl's cavern. She steps over bones, and steps through dusty cobwebs. A large spider stalks her, but the great owl kills the spider with a crush of his foot, proving just how large and powerful he is. The great owl shares many similarities with Nicodemus, including the glowing eyes, the long mustache, and even the warts on the great owl's claws are also reminiscent of Nicodemus's hands. Don Bluth, the director, claimed these similarities were done on purpose. They have aspects of being the same character. Mrs. Brisby apologizes to the great owl for the disturbances. He seems uninterested. She claims her son's life is in danger, and he eats a moth out of the sky. He tells her to just move her family. Then he whirls up a gust of wind that drops bones on top of the terrified Mrs. Brisby. But she retains her strength and she continues to ask for help. She finally tells him that her name is Mrs. Brisby, wife to the late Jonathan Brisby. The great owl is surprised to hear who her husband was. Even he himself, the great owl, knows of the late Jonathan Brisby. He then tells her to go to the rosebush near the farmhouse, find the rats, and ask for Nicodemus. The rats will be able to help her move her house. Mrs. Brisby doubts this plan, but the great owl reassures her. Then he flies off into the night, most likely to go hunt. Beth, the farmer's wife, is hanging up clothes, while Jeremy the crow sneaks most inconspicuously by her and the cat, Dragon. He bumps into Mrs. Brisby. Surprisingly, she recognizes him, even in his full disguise. She is trying to find the entrance to the rosebush. She seems annoyed by the distraction. She doesn't have long until the tractor is fixed. Mrs. Brisby continues forward into the rose bush, finally stumbling upon the entrance. She wanders down a thorny path of unknown dangers and vines growing on their own, mythical, some magical, contraptions, and eerie lighting, through the glimmering caves. The animation in these scenes is incredible. It holds up, even today. Scenes like this helped revolutionize animation moving forward. Don Bluth split from Disney because he wasn't fond of the corporate world. He wanted to make animations to produce stories, regardless of profits or losses. Originally, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIM was pitched to Disney, in the early 1970s, but Disney rejected the movie idea. Unfortunately, after passing away in 1973, Robert O'Brien, the author of the novel, did not get to see the movie released. He did not even get to see the movie as it was made, by Don Bluth and his new independent animation studio. Mrs. Brisby, continuing into the rosebush, spots a beautiful path. The flowers close as she comes closer, and a large security rat blocks her path. She tries to explain herself, but the security rat doesn't care at all. He attacks her. Luckily, Mr. Ages appears, and Mrs. Brisby is relieved, but Mr. Ages is angry that she is in the rosebush. She explains she saw the great owl, who told her to visit Nicodemus, and Mr. Ages changes his tune once again. Mr. Ages leads Mrs. Brisby down into the home of the rats. One rat lies hidden and sneaks up on Mr. Ages and Mrs. Brisby. Mr. Ages is not amused. He knows the sneaky rat is none other than Justin, captain of the guard. Justin is a playful and confident rat. He is good-natured, and friendly. Mrs. Brisby and Justin share an interesting moment together. He is surprised to learn she is the wife of the late Mr. Jonathan Brisby. I know what you are thinking, and yes, I do ship them. Mrs. Brisby is impressed by the electricity. Justin informs her that unfortunately, they are currently stealing the electricity from humans. Mr. Ages, Justin, and Mrs. Brisby go into a lantern that has been altered by the rats to make an underwater elevator. Justin says Jenner is acting problematic, attacking Nicodemus publicly, but Justin is not worried, thinking nothing will come from it. Mr. Ages is very concerned. The water drains from around the lantern elevator in a very lovely animation sequence. Justin tilts Mrs. Brisby's chin up, referring to her as a sweet lady, letting her know she is always welcome. Mr. Ages is not pleased with his behavior, but, I am. The three walk by the grain storage, hearing Jenner call out to the other rats about how Nicodemus has to go. Mr. Ages stops them at the door to listen more, but Justin walks right in, confidently, as one would expect, from the captain of the guard. Justin introduces Mrs. Brisby to the other rats. But Jenner is not happy about this. Jenner is a large rat, who is hungry for power. He will try to convince anyone that listens, that Nicodemus is not a good leader. Justin explains to the rats, that Mrs. Brisby has been to see the great owl, and that he has requested that the rats help move her home. Since her home was Jonathan's home, and Jonathan saved them all, they should help her. Jenner makes a plan with his crony, Sullivan. Sullivan seems wary to help with Jenner's plan. Jenner then apologizes to Mrs. Brisby, and claims it would be his honor to help with the other rats. Mr. Ages is very suspicious of Jenner. Back at the Brisby residence, the crow, Jeremy, has been tied up by the shrew. He tries to be nice to the shrew, but Auntie Shrew doesn't trust Jeremy. As soon as the shrew leaves, Martin immediately tries to untie Jeremy. Jeremy tells the children that their mother went to the rose bush, to see the rats. The rats are coming soon to help move their house. Mr. Ages takes Mrs. Brisby to see Nicodemus. Nicodemus tells her to read the book. She listens to him, informing Nicodemus that it was Jonathan that taught her to read. The book describes how Jonathan died, sacrificing himself for the cause. He tried to give sleeping powder to the cat, dragon, but he was caught. Nicodemus tells her to look into the looking glass. The glass comes to life, to show her the past. And to show her the secret of n.i.m.h. Before n.i.m.h, the rats lived on the streets, living off humans. They were captured. The rats were put in cages. Many other animals were there. The other animals were also in cages. At night, the crying of the animals could be heard. There were unspeakable tortures done to the animals, in the National Institute of Mental Health. 20 rats, and 11 mice were given an injection. This injection altered the DNA of the rodents, and they all became intelligent. Nicodemus learned how to read on his own, and one night, he unlocked his cage. The mice and rats were able to escape the cages. The rodents went to leave through a vent, but the wind was too strong, and all the mice were blown away. No mice survived, except Jonathan Brisby, and Mr. Ages. The rats, Mr. Ages, and Jonathan almost managed to escape. But there was a locked door at the end of their path. Only Jonathan Brisby was small enough to climb through, and he figured out how to unlock the cage from the outside. He freed the trapped rats and Mr. Ages, saving the rest of the survivors. After seeing this, Nicodemus gives her the magical amulet with the bright red stone. Jonathan would want her to have it. Nicodemus tells her that the stone is sleeping and it will only come to life with a courageous heart. On the back of the amulet, there are words. You can unlock any door, if you only have the key. Nicodemus explains to Mrs. Brisby, how Jonathan never told her about the injections from n.i.m.h. Because the injections kept him young forever. Which explains, absolutely, everything about why he didn't tell her. Jenner, who is creeping nearby, claims that once Nicodemus is gone, they can take over. Sullivan is unsure, but Jenner informs him that they can just drop Mrs. Brisby's house on top of Nicodemus. The weight of the cinder block will crush his bones, and then Jenner will take his place, as king of the rats. Mrs. Brisby, Justin, captain of the guard, and Nicodemus travel by boat. Justin explains that, for the plan to work, someone must go into the farmhouse kitchen and put sleeping powder in the cat dragon's food. Mr. Ages broke his leg trying. Mrs. Brisby curiously asks about the plan and they explain to her that the plan is to stop stealing from the farmer. It is wrong to steal. Mrs. Brisby tells Nicodemus she must prepare her children for the move, and he tells her they will wait until dark for her. Before leaving, she says she is scared of the cat, dragon, but then she comes back. She volunteers to give the sleeping powder to the cat herself. Nicodemus agrees. Justin is reluctant, but eventually, he also agrees to go with her, and help her. He will meet her at the farmhouse at dusk. Mrs. Brisby runs home. On the way home she bumps into Jeremy, who is running from Auntie Shrew. Jeremy, being the crow that he is mesmerized by the sparkly necklace Mrs. Brisby holds. She tells him to go gather all the string he can. He says it will take all day, but eventually goes off to help with her request. Later, Justin and Mrs. Brisby are at the farmhouse. She is nervous, and she expresses that she hopes the rats make it from the rose bush to Thorn Valley. He tells her to leave the cloak behind so it doesn't get caught, and she gives him her cloak and her necklace. He supports her. She is extremely nervous. She makes a move for the food while the cat scratches at the door, but she is caught by the farmer's son, Billy Fitzgibbons. In the book, the farmer's son's name is Paul, not Billy. Movie son Billy asks his mom to keep Mrs. Brisby as a pet, and she reluctantly agrees. Justin leaves her there, saying he will have to come back for her. The rats are about to move her house. Meanwhile, Auntie Shrew is watching the children, and doing laundry with Mrs. Brisby's kids. They have no idea that their mom is trapped in a cage. Meanwhile, Mrs. Brisby is in the golden bird cage, in the kitchen of the farmhouse. It is now nighttime. Nicodemus said he would wait for her until dark, so the rats will not wait for her to move the house. The farmer then receives another call from n.i.m.h. He says he sees nothing special about the rats, but the traps don't work on the rats. n.i.m.h. informs him that they will be there in the morning to exterminate the rats under the rose bush. Mrs. Brisby panics, knowing she must warn the rats that n.i.m.h is coming to exterminate them. Meanwhile, the rats are using a complex pulley system to move her house, her children, and Auntie Shrew, who gets knocked out by a bead. Hidden in plain sight, Jenner and Sullivan wield swords near the ropes of the pulley system, but Sullivan refuses to cut the line. The rats continue to pull the Brisby household using the pulley system. Mrs. Brisby works on escaping the cage. She accidentally hurts herself, but is able to escape through the water container. Nicodemus watches the house transfer intently. Nicodemus wants to make sure the house is moved safely. Jenner cuts the ropes by himself. The contraption built by the rats breaks apart. The children are hurt, and they are scared. A fire is started inside, and luckily, Auntie Shrew puts out the fire. Justin and the other rats race to save Nicodemus. But it is too late. Nicodemus has been crushed by the cinder block, just as Jenner wanted. Back to Mrs. Brisby, she uses string inside the cage to propel down. She falls directly in front of the cat, Dragon. But she sneaks away because the sleeping powder, made by Mr. H's, works very well. The cat is very much knocked out. Jenner is already telling the other rats that they should just go back to the rose bush where they belong. But Mrs. Brisby interrupts him to warn him and the other rats that n.i.m.h is coming to exterminate the rats inside the rose bush, in the morning. They must leave the farm tonight. Jenner gets upset. He tells the other rats not to listen to her, and then Jenner attacks her, but Justin comes to her rescue. The stone comes to life, which Jenner immediately notices. Jenner goes after Mrs. Brisby, cutting down Justin, and his previous ally, Sullivan. Justin and Jenner engage in a sword duel, where Jenner breaks Justin's sword. Justin realizes that Jenner must have planned to kill Nicodemus, and Jenner confesses. Jenner is struck down by Justin. But he wasn't actually out of the fight. Jenner was just pretending to try to sneak up on Justin, but then, all of a sudden, he is struck by a dagger, thrown by Sullivan. Jenner meets his end being stabbed in the back by the one rat he pretended was his friend. Rest in peace, Sullivan. Mrs. Brisby hears her children calling out, and she feels glad they are safe for a single moment, until their house starts sinking into the mud. She tells the rats, and they race to help her. Even Mr. H's, on his broken leg, jumps into action. The house starts filling with mud and Mrs. Brisby's children scream for help inside the cinder block. The rats all try their hardest, but the house keeps sinking deeper, and deeper, into the mud. Cynthia falls into the mud, and says she cannot breathe. Mrs. Brisby jumps into the mud with the house. The amulet falls off her neck. Justin pulls her back, not letting her down in the mud with the house. She fights against him. She would rather be in the mud, trying to save her children. She is very desperate. Just then, as if by magic, the amulet shoots out the mud and it speaks in the voice of Nicodemus. His face appears in the amulet. Mrs. Brisby touches the stone, and the power is fully awakened. She is able to move the rope herself using the power of the amulet. She moves her family out of the mud, to safety. She passes out after using the power of the amulet. And the rats are amazed. Later, the exterminator is seen cleaning out the rose bush, just as Mrs. Brisby warned them. But the rats have already moved to Thorn Valley. In the final scene, the family is shown happy, and all together. Timmy is recovering inside, safely. Jeremy comes with the thread that Mrs. Brisby asked for. He is surprised her house has already been moved. Teresa nurses her mom by bandaging her wound from the birdcage. Jeremy asks Mrs. Brisby to borrow her shiny necklace, but she tells him she has already given the amulet to Justin. Mrs. Brisby tells her kids they can go visit the rats when they're older. Then Auntie Shrew calls out to Mrs. Brisby. Martin is certainly not pleased. Jeremy and another crow find love at first sight, and the two of them fly off together with the string. Thank you for watching. Do you think Mrs. Brisby should have given Justin the amulet? Did you think they had as much chemistry as I thought they had? Why didn't they let out the other animals? Do you miss hand-drawn animation like this? If so, Don Bluth, the legendary animator and director of this film, currently has a drawing school open on his website for learning about traditional, hand-drawn, animation styles. I will be discussing more Don Bluth movies in the future. Many experimental animation techniques were introduced in this film. It set the quality standard of animated films moving forward. Other mouse-related animation companies felt the need to try to compete with this film, but The Secret of NIMH will always be one of the greatest animated films of all time. Each scene was hand-drawn, and hand-painted, through hours upon hours of human labor, passion, dedication, and raw talent. I would like to take this time to have a moment of admiration for the deceased voice actors, who have passed away, since the movie's release, including the endlessly talented and always missed, Dama DeLuise, the iconic, prolific, English actress, Hermione Baddeley, the multi-talented Arthur Mallet, John Carradine, with 351 film and television credits, founder member of the American Conservatory Theater, Paul Shinar, World War II veteran Aldo Ray, American radio personality Tom Hatton, Girl with 1,000 Voices, Lucille Bliss, and of course, we should not forget, Elizabeth Hartman, who suffered with depression, and was not able to cope with her inner pain. She died of self-defenestration in 1987. The Secret of NIMH was her last movie. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again for watching. Goodbye.